He left a sticky note on the counter that read, "Eat the leftovers. We'll be late." That single line told me more about my place in this house than any argument ever could. I quietly warmed the cold food, then tucked that note into my recipe box, my first piece of proof. They thought I was just a guest, but that was only the beginning of my story. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment, letting me know where you're watching from. The kitchen light flickered as I came home, still half expecting the sound of voices from the dining table. The house was too quiet for a night that was supposed to be a celebration. Byron's promotion, my son's big moment. I had set aside my blue dress for it, ironed it twice, even wrapped a small card that said, "So proud of you, sweetheart." But there it was instead, a yellow, sticky note on the counter. Neat handwriting that wasn't his. "Eat the leftovers. We'll be late." The refrigerator hummed softly as I opened it, the light spilling across the stainless steel like a hospital lamp. 3 containers were stacked neatly, one labeled chicken, another rice, and a third salad. I took a fork, tried to pretend it was fine. I could hear faint laughter through Byron's phone, still on the kitchen island. A restaurant clip playing from his social feed, Darlie's voice rising above the music, cheerful, polished. "We're so proud of you, babe," she said, the clinking of wine glasses echoing. I smiled to no one, just to steady my face, and sat at the counter, chewing through the cold chicken like it was an obligation. When I finished, I washed the plate and looked down the hallway. The family photos had been rearranged again. Byron and Darlie at the lake. Byron and Darlie with her parents. The new Christmas photo, crooked. I reached out to straighten it, only to see my arm frozen in the reflection of glass. I wasn't in the new picture at all. My last appearance was from years ago, half-cropped on the edge of a frame from before Harold died. I remembered that day. I had baked 4 pies, coordinated everyone's outfits, paid the first mortgage payment when Byron was out of work. My hand trembled as I aligned the frame, then stopped halfway, leaving it tilted. A slant in symmetry, a truth no one else would notice. The silence in the house was heavy, filled with the faint click of the thermostat and the distant hum of sprinklers outside. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls, just the same thread from Harold, my late husband, still saved at the top. "Don't forget to eat something warm." He had texted me once during tax season. I scrolled up, reading it again and again until the words blurred. The sprinklers clicked rhythmically against the window. Dependable things never talked back. Maybe that's why they lasted. I stood, packed the containers neatly into the fridge, each one labeled again, "Tomorrow." I threw away nothing. Even the note, I folded it, pressed the crease sharply, and slipped it into the little recipe box by the sink. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was habit, maybe proof. My fingers brushed the edge of the box, and I thought of how many times I'd written grocery lists, birthday reminders, doctor appointments, things that once meant something to this house. Before turning off the light, I glanced once more at the crooked frame and decided to leave it that way. Let it lean. Let it be imperfect, like the truth between us. I whispered to the quiet kitchen. "Tomorrow, I'll start writing everything down, even the small things." I climbed the stairs slowly, the steps creaking like old bones under my weight. From Byron's room came a faint vibration, a new message tone. I didn't check it. I didn't need to know what it said. I didn't throw away that note. I kept it, like proof that kindness can expire. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, thin as gauze, tracing pale lines across the kitchen floor. I was up early, the way widows often are, out of habit, not purpose. The coffee machine gurgled softly, releasing a puff of steam that curled upward and vanished before it reached the light. I poured a cup, letting the warmth rest between my palms. That's when I heard them. Their voices came from downstairs, just faint enough that I had to hold my breath to hear. Darlie's tone, bright, clipped, carried through the vents. "It's just practical. Byron. We could turn the basement into her own space. Private, comfortable, and out of the way when clients stopped by." There was a pause. Then Byron's voice, softer. "Yeah, maybe it'd give her some independence. Independence. A polite word for exile. I stood behind the wall, my hand tightening around the coffee mug. Steam rose between my fingers, blurring everything for a moment. The counter, the light, the life I thought I still belonged to. The smell of coffee and betrayal mingled quietly. I didn't move until their footsteps faded. Later that morning, I came back to the kitchen to rinse my cup. The marble island gleamed, everything placed neatly as if staged for a magazine. But there it was, an architectural sketch lying open like a confession. Basement remodel concept. My name, Mom, storage area 2, scribbled beside a rectangle of shaded blue ink. Next to it, a home decor catalog lay open to a spread of budget laminate flooring and faux wood panels. Byron entered, slipping on his work jacket. "Oh, that, just a draft," he said casually. "Don't overthink it." Mom. I smiled, that old practice smile that used to smooth his childhood storms. "Of course," I said. As he left, I slipped the blueprint under a pile of unopened mail, between the electric bill and a coupon booklet. Paper hiding paper. I was learning. Upstairs, in the guest room that used to be my office corner, the old oak desk still stood against the wall. The brass key hung from its drawer, just where Harold had left it years ago. I turned it once, and the lock gave easily. Inside, a bundle of envelopes tied with a ribbon. The color faded to dusted gold. I recognized Harold's handwriting. The top envelope was labeled Property Deed, 2008. The paper was yellowed, brittle at the edges, but the names were clear as sunrise. Byron Crow and Arliss Crow, co-owners. My hand steadied. My name had not been erased after all. I traced the embossed notary's seal with my thumb. The ink had bled slightly over time, but it was still mine. Proof, quiet, patient proof, in the mirror above the desk. A woman looked back at me, lines deeper, eyes clearer. I studied her for the first time in years. There was something unshaken there, something that had waited too long to remember itself. I whispered softly to that reflection, "You can't move the foundation when my name's on it." I folded the deed neatly, slid it into a folder, and carried it downstairs. It found its hiding place between the recipe books, the ones Darlie never touched. When I closed the cabinet door, I caught a small smile in the reflection of the glass oven. It wasn't triumph, it was awakening. That evening, Darlie leaned casually against the counter. "Mom, would you mind sorting the basement boxes tomorrow? It'd help us get started." Her tone was syrupy sweet, the kind you pour to hide something bitter. I met her eyes. "I'll see what I can do." The same yellow note from the night before lay under my coffee mug, edges curling slightly. I lifted it, smoothed it out flat, and pressed it between my fingers as if memorizing its texture. The ink had faded a little. Still, it spoke volumes. People build rooms. I thought, I build records. As I turned off the light, I whispered into the dark. They didn't know the walls they were pushing me toward already had my name carved in the concrete. The sky was Texas blue, that kind of endless color that made everything look harmless. I arrived early at the community park with trays of potato salad and baked beans, carrying them from my car one careful step at a time. The pavilion smelled of charcoal and sunscreen. Neighbors were already laughing, the sound bouncing off the picnic tables like tin can echoes. I laid out napkins, straightened cups, made sure everything looked neat. Darlie floated between groups, her sundress catching every bit of light. She talked about interior paint tones and the new HOA rule about mailbox colors. I kept folding napkins, my fingers steady, my ears sharper than I meant them to be. Byron and I stayed up all night finalizing the design. Darlie told the group of homeowners near the lemonade stand, "It's been such a journey for us." My name drifted into her next sentence, soft and past tense. When Byron's mom used to help, things were simpler. The words stung more than they should have. I smiled at the passing neighbors, pretending I was too busy arranging condiments to hear. The picnic tables stretched like a stage, and I, apparently, was the prop that stayed off to the side. By mid-afternoon, the speeches began. Byron's boss clinked a plastic cup with his fork. To Byron, promotion to regional consultant. "You've built such a strong foundation here." Everyone clapped. Darlie leaned against Byron, eyes gleaming. She said it proudly, like a line she'd rehearsed. "He built this house with his own 2 hands." The crowd cheered. I stood near the grill, holding a plate of ribs. The sentence pressed against me like heat. I remembered co-signing that mortgage, writing the first check, Harold's hand resting over mine as we sealed the envelope. A neighbor turned and smiled. "You must be so proud of your son." I swallowed before answering. "I am," I said quietly. The truth was still true, even if it hurt. Then Darlie added, laughing lightly, "We're just glad Mom has somewhere cozy now." Laughter followed, a soft ripple of polite amusement. Byron squeezed her hand, oblivious to the small cruelty in her tone. I dabbed my fingers with a napkin, pressing harder than I needed to, tiny, silent proof that I could still control at least one thing. Later, near the cooler, I was alone again, scooping melting ice over cans of soda. Darlie appeared beside me, her voice low and sugar-sweet. "Try not to make this about you." "Okay. Byron's worked hard for this." I didn't look at her. "I know hard work," I said, calm as the ice water. "I paid for the first year of it." She smiled without warmth. "Let's not dig up old paperwork." That word, paperwork, hit me like a spark in dry grass. I closed the cooler lid gently, sealing the cold air inside. Patience melts faster than ice. On the drive home, the car was quiet except for the hum of the radio. Byron tapped the steering wheel to some old country tune. Darlie scrolled on her phone. I watched houses roll past the window, brick boxes, each with trimmed lawns and family flags fluttering proudly. Every home looked like a life I had once imagined for us. Harold's voice echoed in memory. "Never argue in front of strangers. Arliss. They remember the wrong winner." I looked down at my purse resting on my lap. Inside was a folded copy of the deed. I pressed my hand over it, feeling the weight of my own quiet authority. They could pretend I didn't exist, but paper didn't forget names. That evening, the house smelled faintly of grilled meat. Darlie reheated the leftovers, sliding a plate toward me without meeting my eyes. "Dinner's ready," she said flatly. I looked at the plate, then at her. "I'll have dinner elsewhere." The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Byron looked up from his phone, surprised. Darlie blinked, unsure whether to protest or smile. I put on my shawl, the one Harold bought me years ago for a church picnic, and walked to the porch. The sunset turned everything gold and forgiving. Behind me, the door stayed open just a moment longer than necessary. I didn't slam it. I let the air close it for me. The law office sat between a nail salon and a tax prep service, the kind of strip mall spot you drive past 100 times without noticing. At 9:05. Emma, I stood at the door with my old manila envelope tucked beneath my arm, the copy of the deed safe inside. The glass door chimed as I entered. The air smelled faintly of toner and carpet cleaner. A young receptionist looked up from her monitor. "Can I help you?" "Ma'am." I gave my married name, the one I hadn't said out loud in a while. Her face softened. "Oh, you were one of Harold Crow's clients. I can pull your archive file if it's still in storage." As she disappeared into the back, I listened to the low hum of the copy machine. It reminded me of our old file cabinet at home, the one that used to rattle when Harold opened it too hard. Paper and memory, they age the same way. Quietly, she returned with a small folder labeled Crow, Harold and Arliss. The edges were yellowed. Inside, beneath the deed and trust papers, was a single sheet I didn't recognize. It was a healthcare directive addendum, unsigned by me. Behind it, a more recent letter. The logo at the top read, Havenwell Health Partners, Byron's employer's insurance carrier. The envelope was addressed to household decision maker. My name wasn't on the line. I read the sentence twice. Effective upon relocation of dependent relative. Coverage will adjust to extended family allocation. Relocation. Dependent. The words pulsed like little bruises on the page. The paralegal approached quietly. "Would you like certified copies?" "Mrs. Crowe." "Yes," I said, my voice even, stamped. "Please." Each rubber thud of the copy seal sounded like a gavel striking, small, Final judgments echoing in a too-quiet room. I gathered the papers, thanked her, and stepped outside into the sun. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed. I called Byron. It rang twice before his voicemail picked up. Moments later, a text appeared. In meetings, all good. We'll talk tonight. 3 gray dots blinked, then disappeared. Conversation over. I started the car but didn't go home. Instead, I drove toward Dallas, to the design showroom where Darlie once bragged about her architect's open concept. The receptionist at the desk recognized the address when I mentioned it. "Ah, yes," she said, scrolling through a monitor. "We're finalizing a revision. Basement remodel at that property. Right?" I nodded. Could I see the latest permit attachment? Just confirming an old document for the family. She turned the screen slightly, not realizing how much she'd already shown. A digital floor plan glowed on the monitor. The lower section was marked Mom Suite Basement, direct access to utility kitchen. A red bubble comment hovered near the outline. No outside door. Who approved this revision? I asked, keeping my tone casual. She checked the notes. Mrs. Darlie Crow. I smiled faintly. Of course she did. I wrote down the vendor codes on a notepad she'd handed me. My handwriting looked steady, but I could feel my pulse beating in the pen. Back home, the refrigerator hummed over the silence. I opened the junk drawer, the one Darlie always used for miscellaneous. Under HOA mailers and grocery coupons sat a rolled-up print. Held together with a tan hair tie, I unrolled it slowly. The same layout, basement mother's room Rev B. A sticky note in Darlie's handwriting read, "Close to kitchen. Easy meals. Keep upstairs clutter-free." A door opened behind me. Darlie's voice was syrup-sweet. "You found our plans. Efficient, right?" I turned, meeting her eyes. Efficient for whom? The hair tie snapped between my fingers. The sound was soft, but it felt like a crack running through the room. She started explaining logistics. How would it be quieter? Easier? Fewer stairs? Every word polished. Practiced. "You'll love it down there," she said. "Close to everything you need. Convenience." I thought, tastes like a locked door when you're the only one with the key. That night, I sat at my desk, the lamp casting a small circle of light. I made 2 stacks. Stack A, the healthcare letter, the certified copies. Stack B, the floor plan, the sticky note photo, the vendor codes. I made a checklist in neat handwriting. Confirm primary care coverage. Request city permit history. Contact elder law attorney. I placed both stacks into my tote and zipped it shut. My house key lay on the table, glinting under the lamp. I turned it once and then left it there, face up. Deliberate. If they were building a room for my silence, they should learn what my silence could build. I slid the key across the table and kept the proof with me. Tuesday morning smelled of rain on concrete and coffee reheated twice. I drove the old sedan into the Plano City Hall lot and sat there for a moment, watching contractors walk in with their rolled blueprints. Their boots echoed confidence. Mine carried quiet purpose. The tote sat beside me, the one holding 2 stacks of truth, when the automatic doors whooshed open. The air inside felt cold enough to erase hesitation. I followed the sign to Permit Services Department and took a number. The screen blinked 34. I was 37. Behind the counter, a young clerk with a copper braid looked up and smiled. Her badge read Liberty, the kind of name that made irony feel alive. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," I replied, steady. "I need public permit records for a property on Ridgeview Court." She typed the address, eyes narrowing slightly. "That's a residential remodel, active file. You're the owner's mother." Liberty nodded slowly, scanning the screen again. Then, almost under her breath, "You'd be surprised how many families add basements lately." A few more keystrokes, a soft printer hum, and she leaned closer. "This file's marked as basement conversion for dependent relative non-exit design." The words hit harder than I expected. "Non-exit?" I asked. "It means there's no independent egress." She explained carefully. "It's sealed from the inside. The city doesn't require occupant consent if it's classified as dependent care. Her voice dropped. "You might want a certified copy." Yes, I said, stamped. As the printer began to whir, the sound filled the office, paper feeding out, line by line, like a machine confessing the truth. Liberty slid the pages across the counter, her eyes kind but wary. I thanked her, took the documents, and walked back through the same automatic doors. This time, they sounded less like an opening and more like a verdict. In the car, sunlight streamed through the windshield, catching the faint yellow of the printed form. I read every line until one clause stopped me cold. Clause 14. Occupant consent not required if dependent care arrangement exists within family property. I traced the words with my finger. The system didn't need my permission to move me. It only needed the illusion of care. They made me their project. I whispered. Not their parent. The healthcare letter from yesterday's file flashed in my mind, the one that turned me into a dependent relative. 2 systems, 2 signatures missing mine. The highlighted clause glowed under the sunlight, a legal wound too neat to bleed. At noon, I parked near a row of food trucks, unwrapped a sandwich, and watched the city pulse around me. Construction trucks roared past, loaded with lumber and drywall, men building walls. I chewed slowly, thinking, men build walls, but I built a name that still owns what's beneath them. From my glove compartment, I pulled a small notepad and began a list titled Phase 1, Confirm Clinic Coverage, City Permit Follow-Up, Contact Gideon Elder Law Referral via Lamar. Each bullet felt like oxygen. When I returned home, the house looked ordinary again, too ordinary. Darley's voice carried from the living room, bright and rehearsed. Yes, the contractor can start next week. Perfect timeline. I slipped the certified permit copy into the recipe book beside the sticky note from that first night. The paper edges brushed together like old conspirators. Byron looked up from his laptop. "Mom, everything okay?" I smiled gently. "Everything's becoming clearer." He nodded, not realizing what I meant. That evening, I drove across town, the sky dimming to copper. Streetlights blinked on, one by one, like evidence coming alive. At Lamar's community center, he met me by the door. I handed him one of the certified copies and a folded note with Gideon's name. "Just need a quiet referral," I said. "No problem," he replied. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said. Proof is the only weapon that doesn't bruise. I drove home with the tote beside me, its weight heavier, but somehow easier to carry. Each passing light reflected off the windshield, another small truth illuminated. By nightfall, my proof had copies, witnesses, and a heartbeat of its own. The sound of engines arrived before the sunrise did. At 7:30 sharp, 2 contractor trucks rolled into the driveway, white logos gleaming under the Texas light. I stood on the porch in my robe, coffee mug in hand, watching as drywall sheets slid from their beds like slabs of intention. Darley directed them with a clipboard, her hair tied up neatly, voice clipped with authority. The way she said Mom's area made the words sound like a room assignment at a facility. The hammering began almost immediately, each nail a small punctuation mark sealing a future no one had asked me to approve. I didn't flinch. The noise became rhythm, like a metronome keeping time for my patients. Eldon, the foreman, introduced himself while measuring the frame near the basement door. His voice carried that easy friendliness men use when they think you won't remember details. "Morning, ma'am. Just here to start on the privacy door install." "Privacy?" I asked, tilting my head. "Yeah, got the specs right here." He tapped his clipboard. "Keypad entry. Main residents get access. You'll have a backup once we're done." I smiled. Sounds very modern. As he turned, I glanced down long enough to catch the brand and model on the paper. Seculock 3100. Keypad entry system. I repeated it in my mind 3 times before walking back inside. Later, it went straight into my notebook under S11. Control by code. By noon, the house smelled of sawdust and cheap coffee. Workers had left for lunch, leaving behind a hum of power tools cooling down. I stood in the kitchen doorway while Darley bragged on the phone about how beautifully the basement's coming together. Byron, half listening, nodded while scrolling through work emails. Some people build prisons without bars, just good intentions. After they left for errands, I walked downstairs. The air was cooler, heavy with dust and damp insulation. The basement walls were half covered in new studs, the outline of a private suite taking shape. I measured the space quietly, noting electrical outlets and air vents. Then, a sudden click. The temporary plywood door swung shut. I heard the latch fall. Darkness folded around me except for a narrow strip of vent light near the ceiling. I stayed still, heartbeat calm. I pressed my palm to the wall, thin, hollow, new. Then I tapped lightly on the metal pipe beside me. Tap, tap. The sound echoed up like a distress signal no one had time to hear. Minutes later, boots thudded above. The latch lifted. Eldon's voice came, slightly out of breath. Didn't know you were in there. Ma'am. Sorry about that. It's fine, I said evenly, stepping past him. Good to know it seals well. That evening, after dinner, I opened my ledger at the kitchen table. I logged every detail. Contractor name, door model, permit code, and time of accidental lock-in 3 Cornisibimp M. I added a short line beneath. Never rely on their oversight. Turn it into record. The refrigerator light blinked as I took a picture of the new installation notice on the fridge. Keypad delivery. Thursday. Darlie had taped it right beside a grocery list. Every prison has paperwork. I'm just making mine public. Later that night, I sat by the unfinished stairs, listening to the steady drip of a pipe. The air smelled of metal and pine. Beneath that rhythm, I heard something else, resolve sharpening. I took out my phone and typed a single message to Lamar. Time to schedule that consultation. If they were sealing me in, they should have checked who signed the foundation. The morning felt clear, like a page about to be written on. I carried my tote and its thick folders through the glass doors of Lamar's community center. The hum of a vending machine and the faint chatter of seniors playing cards filled the air. Lamar waved me into his small office. The walls lined with donation flyers and framed thank you notes. Arliss, this is Gideon, he said, nodding to a man in a gray suit sitting beside a folding table. He helps families like yours, quietly. I met the man's steady gaze. Quiet is my specialty. He smiled faintly, gesturing to the chair across from him. Then we'll get along fine. I set the manila folder between us. It felt heavier than it had that morning. Gideon's office downtown looked like time had slowed there decades ago. Shelves filled with dusty legal codes, diplomas fading in their frames. He flipped through the deed, healthcare letter, and permit copies with the care of someone who's seen too much hidden under polite signatures. This permit clause, he said, tapping the page, and this healthcare adjustment, they align in language. It's a pattern. Families sometimes present isolation as protection. Texas law watches for that now. I watched his pen underline dependent relative non-exit design. They might think it's caregiving. He continued, but it's control. Control leaves fingerprints, I said. I've been collecting them. He glanced up, intrigued. Good, because that makes you not just a client, but a witness. When he stamped the first page of my file, the sound felt like validation in ink. Gideon recommended I check for any dormant accounts tied to my husband's estate. So I drove to my old credit union on Preston Road. The same clerk, Paula, still worked there. Her name badge cracked at the edges, but her memory sharp. Arliss Connor, she said, typing into her screen. Well, look at that. We still have a joint savings account under your husband's name. You're the secondary holder, been dormant since 12 years ago. How much? I asked quietly. She printed a slip, slid it across. The number wasn't large, but it was mine. For the first time in months, I felt the air expand in my lungs. I thought they'd taken every choice. I murmured. Turns out, I'd only stopped looking. Paula smiled, not fully understanding, but enough. We'll help you reactivate it. When I left, the paper felt like a key in my hand. At a small cafe across the street, I sat near the window and ordered soup. The spoon circled through it slowly, tracing my thoughts. I pulled out my notebook and drew a new timeline. Evidence, witness, legal contact. Financial base. I used to make lists for groceries. I whispered. Now it's for freedom. The world outside looked ordinary. Parents walking strollers. Traffic lights changing. But I was already planning my next move. By evening, I returned home. Darlie's voice echoed from the kitchen as she hosted a live-streamed home tour. Her tone was sugary. Her eyes flicked toward the camera every few seconds. Byron worked upstairs, headphones on. I sat quietly at the dining table, opened my banking app, and transferred the recovered funds into a new account under my maiden name. One tap, one quiet reclaiming of power. Everything okay. Mom, Byron called down. Better than before, I said, and meant it. The phone screen glowed against my palm like a secret candle. That night, I wrote myself a letter. This is the night I stopped being the dependent. I signed it, dated it, and folded it neatly into the back of my ledger. They built walls. I wrote in the margin, but I built a case. By morning, my plan had a ledger number and a lawyer's name. The trucks came before sunrise, headlights sliding over the driveway like intruders testing boundaries. From my kitchen window, I watched them unload a heavy steel core door, wrapped tight in plastic-stamped reinforced soundproof. The morning air was cool enough to fog the breath of the men hauling it. Darlie, already dressed in a fitted blazer, stood outside signing papers as if she were closing a property deal. She even filmed a short clip for her social media, narrating brightly, turning our basement into a modern suite for Mom. The foreman laughed. Containment grade stuff, he said to one of the workers, not realizing I heard him. Containment. The word sat in my chest like a weight. I stepped onto the porch, coffee in hand. Would anyone like a refill? I asked, voice pleasant. The men nodded politely, only one accepted. I caught a glimpse of the order sheet as he set his cup down. Flush mount. Dual locking system. Soundproof insulation per Mrs. Connor's request. You said both sides, I asked lightly. He smiled. Yes, ma'am. That's the new style. Locks either way. I nodded, calm as ever, efficient. But as the screwdriver turned, I could almost hear my freedom tightening with each metallic click. I wrote the date and hour in my notebook. Friday, 42. Door installed. Both sides lockable. Byron came home around 10. I met him at the base of the stairs, holding a glass of water instead of the coffee I wanted. A door that locks both ways. I said quietly, was that your idea or hers? He looked startled, like a boy caught sneaking out. It's just for soundproofing. Mom, you watch TV late. Soundproofing. I repeated, from me or for me. He rubbed the back of his neck. You're reading too much into things. Darlie just wants everyone comfortable. I studied his face, the way his eyes darted, guilt's nervous dance. You built your courage like those walls. I said softly, hollow and thin. He opened his mouth but found no words. The silence between us was louder than any argument. Darlie appeared a minute later, perfectly timed. Mom. She began with a practiced smile. We're doing this for your comfort and ours. Privacy makes harmony. She handed me a glossy brochure labeled Senior-Friendly Suites. Comfort, I said, scanning the smiling stock photo couple on the cover, doesn't need a code. Her smile flickered but held. It's just modern design. That's all. I placed the brochure on the counter without comment. That afternoon, after the contractors left, I stood in front of the finished door. The surface gleamed like a mirror that refused reflection. I turned the latch and stepped inside. Silence swallowed everything. The hum of the refrigerator upstairs, the faint traffic outside. Even my own breathing felt muted. I tapped the wall. No echo. It was a perfect quiet, engineered and absolute, for a full minute. I stayed there, eyes closed, feeling the air thicken. Then I whispered, now I know what freedom costs. That night, I sat at my desk, opened my ledger, and titled the page Friday Lock. I wrote every detail, contractor name, invoice number, delivery time, both sides lockable. I logged the brand of lock, model of keypad, and the serial digits from the sticker still clinging to the doorframe. They think I'm quiet because I'm scared, I murmured as my pen moved steadily. I'm quiet because I'm recording. I called Gideon's office after 9, leaving a message. It's installed. Next step. As discussed. My tone was even, factual. Then I took my pen and slipped it into the recipe box beside the yellow sticky note from the first night. The one that said, "Eat the leftovers. Locks can keep people out, but they can't keep truth from getting in." Saturday morning, the sun rose pale and sharp against the blinds. I sat at my desk, spreading out every receipt, photo, and invoice across the wood grain like pieces of an unfinished puzzle. Each paper held a name, a number, or a date, tiny coordinates of betrayal. I labeled a new folder, receipts, basement title. I'd always believed in keeping records. My husband used to tease that I ran our household like an office. But now, that habit was the only thing keeping me steady. As I wrote, names make paper heavy. I realized weight wasn't measured in ounces. It was measured in proof. By 9:15, I stepped onto the porch, phone in hand, coffee cooling beside me. Birds scattered from the feeder as I dialed Gideon. "Morning, Marlis," he said. "You sound prepared." "I am," I replied. "I need you to check for quiet filings, anything recorded after construction began. And if there's a new valuation draft or title note tied to the house, I want to see it." He paused. "That'll require someone with MLS access. I'll loop in a contact in McKinney. Marla Drennan. She's discreet. Discretion," I said, "isn't silence. It's precision." By 11. I was seated in Marla's modest office, framed certificates gleaming behind her desk. Gideon joined us via speakerphone. Marla clicked through property files. "Here we go," she said softly. "Connor Residence Future Listing Memo, initiated by Darley Connor, LLC," on her monitor. My name was missing from the ownership preview. Marla hesitated. "This memo's marked pre-seller. It's standard for agents prepping a valuation before a change of hands." I leaned closer. "Change of hands," I repeated, tasting the phrase. "Your name isn't on the seller preview," she added gently. I smiled. "Good. Then my name won't be on the lawsuit preview either, until it needs to be." Gideon chuckled darkly through the speaker. "That's the spirit." The yellow highlighter across my erased name glowed like a warning flare. At 12:30, I drove to the Collin County Title Office, the air thick with sawdust and gasoline. Inside, the clerk flipped through files on her screen. She murmured. "There was a payoff statement request last week on your property, originated from Darley Connor's mortgage broker." She turned her monitor toward me. "Request ID 34A9, timestamped 2 days ago. Could I get that reference number and your initials?" I asked. She hesitated, then smiled. "Of course. Mrs. Connor." I left with a slip of paper folded neatly in my pocket. My anger didn't burn, it calcified into clarity. By 1:20, parked outside the office, I saw a new email from Gideon. Attached was a PDF stamped recorded lien, subordinate occupancy clause. I opened it slowly. The document named Darley Connor, LLC, as the lien holder. The clause read, "If primary owner vacates or ceases occupancy, lien matures in full and transfers asset rights. So that's why the door locks both ways," I whispered. Sunlight hit the screen, turning the watermark into a shimmer like liquid glass. Betrayal didn't always scream. Sometimes it notarized itself. That afternoon, I printed every document. The lien, the permit invoice, the door order. I stapled them into one packet. Added sticky notes in red ink, dates, codes, names. Then I made 3 identical envelopes, one labeled Gideon, one attorney copy, one bank officer. Paper was how they planned to move me. Paper would be how I stayed. I slid the envelopes into my tote beside the old recipe box. Dusk settled over the backyard. Porch lights blinked on, one by one. Inside, I could hear Darley laughing, high, confident, hollow. Byron's voice followed, muted and unsure. Locks, liens, and laughter, I murmured, each louder than the last. None louder than proof. The cicadas answered in their rhythm of endurance. On Monday, the bank would hear my voice, and the house would hear the truth. The morning began with 3 envelopes and 1 cup of black coffee. I sealed each envelope, Gideon, attorney, bank, and slipped them into my purse beside a small flash drive. The house was silent except for the steady hum of the refrigerator and the whisper of the reinforced door downstairs. It no longer frightened me. It reminded me why I was awake this early. By 9:10, I stood in the Dallas branch lobby, the glass walls gleaming with city light. I caught my reflection in the doors, older, sharper, more visible than I'd been in years. The receptionist smiled when I gave my appointment time. Senior Loan Services. Mrs. Connor. Conference Room B. Perfect, I said. My voice didn't tremble. It landed clean as paper on a desk. Lennox, the senior loan officer, arrived with a polite nod and a binder. I laid out the documents in order: contractor invoice, title office record, and the subordinate lien printout. His hand paused mid-page when he reached Darley's LLC in the beneficiary line. He glanced up. This was initiated by your family, by my daughter-in-law's company, I answered, without the owner's consent. The silence that followed wasn't uncertainty. It was calculation. I'd worked with men like him before. They measured risk faster than empathy. I'm requesting, I said evenly, a temporary freeze on all payoff discussions until ownership verification and fraud review are complete. And please, Mr. Lennox read the occupancy clause into the meeting notes. He hesitated, but I waited. When I didn't blink, he reached for the paper. Clause 14, he began, voice low. Lien maturity triggered upon vacancy or transfer of occupancy by the primary owner. I nodded. Good. Say that clearly for the record. He looked at me again, this time wary. I pressed the record icon on my phone. This is Arliss Connor. Recording with notice, I said. Mr. Lennox, do you consent to being recorded for verification? He sighed but nodded. Yes, ma'am, I consent. His next words were clean and sharp. The lien matures only if the primary owner vacates. The recent broker request was third-party initiated, not by the owner. As of now, the bank recognizes Mrs. Arliss Connor as the occupying owner on record. There it was, the sound of the lock turning in reverse. I smiled faintly. Thank you. That will do. Inside, my pulse thudded, not from fear, but from victory measured in syllables. When the meeting ended, I placed a small USB on the table. This contains the audio of a previous conversation held in my home, I said. It references coercive language and a plan to force vacancy. I'm submitting it to the fraud review. Lennox accepted it without a word. The printer stamped the case file. The sound, metal hitting paper, was the only applause I needed. He slid my stamped copy across the table. This opens an internal investigation. You'll be notified. I'll already know, I replied. By 2:00, I stepped outside into the Dallas heat. My phone buzzed, Owen's name on the screen. Mom, he said cautiously, Darley mentioned there's a problem with the sale timeline. There is no sale, I said. There's a house, and I'm in it. A pause. Then the faint exhale of a man beginning to choose which side of the line he'd stand on. By late afternoon, I drove home. The sky was gold and thick with humidity. I parked, unlocked the front door, and went straight to my desk. The stamped copy went into the top drawer, next to the folder marked Receipts, Basement Title. I texted Gideon. Hold all inquiries. Bank case open. Downstairs, the reinforced door clicked once in the quiet, less a threat now, more a reminder that protection can look like confinement until you own the key. By closing time, the bank had my voice, and the house had my name. At 3:00, a group text pinged my phone, an invitation to the church potluck, thanking hosts by name. Darley's name was there, along with Byron's. Mine wasn't. I scrolled twice to make sure. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. I wiped my hands on a towel and looked at the refrigerator where their calendar hung beside my own. The word potluck was circled in bright pink. Hers, below it, in my own blue pen. I wrote one quiet note. Attend anyway. By 5:15, I was on the porch when Byron's car rolled into the driveway. He stepped out alone, tie loosened, guilt written in the way his shoulders drooped. Darlie's already there. He said, "She's saving seats. Just please don't make it weird tonight." I opened my purse and handed him the bank's stamped fraud review slip from Monday. "If you're choosing seats," I said, "make sure you're sitting on the right side of the truth." He stared at the paper, lips parting as if to speak, then folded it into his jacket pocket and left without another word. At 6, the church fellowship hall buzzed with voices and casseroles. Paper banners read "Community Strength." I carried a tray of cornbread and found the welcome board. Beneath event sponsors, Darlie's LLC was printed in gold. Below that, a smaller list, helpers. My name was there, stripped of title, just Arlise. On the long table, every place card had Mr. or Mrs. in neat script except mine. The little folded tag just said Arliss. Names had weight. Omission had its own gravity. When the MC called for prayer, I bowed my head, but my ears stayed open. "We thank Darlie and Byron Connor," he said, "for their generosity in this renovation season." Laughter and polite claps filled the air. My name never came. I reached into my purse, feeling the cool edge of the stamped slip and the flash drive. It wasn't anger that moved inside me. It was timing. Halfway through dessert, a woman from the choir asked Darlie about the remodel. "Oh, yes," Darlie said brightly. "We financed the update. It's been such a project." I set my fork down and stood. "Excuse me," I said, smiling. "May I make a small correction for housekeeping?" The MC handed me the mic, expecting a thank you speech. "I'd just like to clarify ownership," I said calmly. "Per the bank's record, the house remains under my name. Any modification requests filed by third parties are now under fraud review." A hush spread. Chairs creaked. I held up the stamped document. "This is from the Dallas branch. Signed yesterday." Someone near the buffet whispered, "She's got paperwork." I nodded. "Paperwork," I said, "is just another kind of prayer, one that stays on file." The MC, cheeks flushed, turned to Byron. "Can you confirm who made the original down payment?" Byron's throat worked. "Mom did," he said quietly. "It's in her name." Every sound in the hall softened, the rustle of plates, the hum of the air conditioner. Darlie's smile flickered like a candle before it dies. "I'm grateful for community," I said, returning the mic. "I only ask that credits match facts." No applause, no rebuke, just silence thick enough to stand on. At 8:40, under the parking lot lights, a man in a gray jacket approached Darlie. "Mrs. Connor?" he asked, handing her an envelope. "Process service. Notice to cease interference and temporary protective filing." She froze mid-step, the same smile stiff on her face. Byron watched, silent, the bank paper still tucked in his pocket. I didn't gloat. I simply thanked the man for his time and turned toward my car. A few elders stopped me near the door. "You handled that decent." "Arliss," one said, "could have been a scene." "I don't do scenes," I said. "Just statements." I returned the mic to the AV cart myself. It clicked into place, a sound of closure. By 9:30, I was home. I relocked the reinforced door and stood under the porch light. It glowed steady, unwavering, like it knew something had shifted. I texted Gideon. S22 public correction done. S23 served. The hall quieted behind me. The paper did the talking. The knock came at first light. Through the screen door, Byron stood in the dawn, his face drawn, eyes rimmed from a sleepless night. In his hand, a small ring of keys glinted against the gray morning. "I think these belong to you," he said, holding them out, my spare house key. Darlie's LLC checkbook clipped beneath the ring. I didn't reach for them immediately. "And what are you asking?" "Byron," he swallowed, "to make the paperwork match the truth." The words weren't an apology, but they were the right direction. I took the keys, feeling the cool metal in my palm. "That starts today," I said. "Follow me to Gideon's office." He nodded once, quiet as the sunrise. By 10 o'clock, we sat across from Gideon's oak desk, papers neatly fanned like a peace treaty. Gideon adjusted his glasses and tapped the final page of the Memorandum of Understanding. "This document," he said, "confirms title and ownership under your name, Mrs. Connor. It ends any LLC claim on the remodel and outlines repayment for misappropriated funds. A copy will go to the church and HOA for public correction. Any further interference activates a protective order automatically." Byron read in silence, jaw tight. Darlie wasn't there. Her initials already appeared beside her attorney's signature from the night before. Gideon handed him the pen. "When you sign, this becomes record." He didn't need prompting. The pen scratched the paper. 3 strokes that sounded like relief. When he looked up, I met his eyes. "You've stopped the damage," I said. "Now start the repair." He nodded, shoulders sinking but lighter than when he'd arrived. By noon, we were at the Collin County Clerk's counter. The clerk stamped the MOU and attached affidavit, the sound echoing like a small gavel. The woman smiled faintly. "Congratulations." "Ma'am." "This locks it in." I thanked her, then turned to Byron. "Coffee?" At the courthouse cafe, we sat by the window with paper cups. He finally spoke. "You didn't have to do all this publicly. Truth doesn't humiliate." "Byron," I said, "lies do. Paperwork is just how truth keeps its shoes on." He almost smiled. Almost. By 3 o'clock, Pastor Ruth was pinning a new flyer on the church bulletin board. The list of donors had changed. No LLC. No false titles. My name appeared in simple black ink. Mrs. Arliss Connor, home restoration sponsor. 2 choir ladies stopped beside me. About time. One said, patting my arm. I didn't grin. I simply nodded, smoothing the corner of the paper so it lay flat, uncurled, straight, honest. Back home near dusk, I laid 3 keys on the living room table. The original house key, the spare Byron had returned, and the new smart fob controlling the reinforced lock I'd installed weeks ago. I held up the one labeled guest, Byron. "This is programmable, revocable, too," I said. He looked uncertain. "You're welcome here." I continued, "By invitation. That's not punishment, it's protection. For both of us." He nodded slowly, taking the guest key and slipping it into his pocket. Not the old one, the right one. In the kitchen. He reached for Darlie's checkbook. "I can write 1 lump payment now." I pushed the drawer closed. "No. Follow the plan you signed. Pay it steady. Let June see what repair looks like when a man means it." He exhaled, a quiet kind of gratitude, and left the checkbook where it was. At 7, Pastor Ruth arrived with a warm casserole and a soft hug. "Thought you might not feel like cooking tonight." "I might again someday," I said, smiling. Later, my phone rang. June, her small face glowing through the screen. "Grandma, look." She held up a drawing of my porch door with the words, "Respect lives here," written in crayon. Tears came, slow and steady. "When you visit," I told her, "you'll pick the paint color for the porch swing. Sky blue," she said instantly. "Like truth." "Exactly," I whispered. The sun melted into the horizon as I stepped onto the porch. The casserole cooled beside me. Fireflies drifted through the yard like little signatures of light. Inside, the reinforced lock blinked once. Green, secure. I leaned back, listening to the creak of the porch swing. The evening soft with peace earned, not gifted. A door is a promise. Tonight, mine keeps the right ones in. When I look back on it all, the notes, the doors, the quiet papers that told the truth. I've learned something I wish I'd known sooner. Peace doesn't come from being silent. It comes from standing steady. Sometimes, keeping your dignity means writing things down, asking the hard questions, and drawing a line with love instead of anger. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, remember, your worth doesn't fade just because someone else stops seeing it. What matters is that you see it. Respect begins where self-respect is restored. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand your ground quietly, the way I did? What did you learn from it? If this story touched your heart, leave a or tell me where you're watching from. And if you'd like to hear more true-to-life stories like this one, Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because every story we share brings a little more light back into the world.